So originally my plan when I was doing this channel was that I was not going to have books behind me because I was thinking that's such a booktuber cliche. And the setting I was using wasn't really working, and a friend of mine talked me into just film in front of your bookshelves because A, sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason, and B, your bookshelves are not going to be cliche. And I realized that's right. Like, most booktubers fit into specific niches, and you can kind of predict a lot of the books they'll have on their shelves based on that, whereas these are just books that I happen to get at roughly a specific time and then group together with other sort of thematically similar books. And so when I started filming in front of the shelf, I picked this one because it has the best natural lighting of any of my bookshelves. And then I only changed really two things. So one of them is, if you look at my Animal Arts and Crafts channel, you will recognize some of the knickknacks on the shelf that I have made myself, the pangolin, the sea moth, the jackalope. And if I pull my head down, you can see the groove build Ani, which is my first video on that channel. But everything else, all these other knickknacks, except maybe the kookaburra I think I also had on the shelf, I pulled from other shelves in order to have more tchotchkes on the shelf as sort of showing my personality as beyond books, like the things that I like. And I looked for things that would fit because these are shallow shelves, which is part of why I didn't have a lot of decorative tchotchkes on these shelves before I started filming here. But the other thing that I did is I pulled one specific book, which when I was doing it, I was thinking it's because this is the book that signals being in a certain subgenre of booktube. And I've noticed at this point there have been 3 books that people have recognized in the comments, and I will say I pretty much never read comments after 48 hours unless I didn't get to any of them in the first 72 hours and I'm trying to catch up like a week later. And so if people have recognized other books after that, I haven't seen it. But the 3 things that people have recognized have been George Lakoff, who is there, Arthur Koestler, who is here, and then Umberto Eco, who is behind me here with several of his books. And none of these are particularly well-known writers. And aside from that, like, I don't have... I mean, some of the books I have are well-known, but they're not easy to recognize. And then the ones that are easy to recognize generally aren't that well-known. And so I pulled this book, and it's also a book that I haven't read, and I don't know if I'll like. And it's also a book that has a negative reputation as part of a whole genre niche of booktube that has reputation. And as I talked about in my video on gender, it is a negative reputation for men, which is this book, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. And as I've mentioned in a few videos, the reason I bought this book is because I had a book I was trying to write, bringing into my writing group, science fiction fantasy writing group, and the only person who really liked what I was doing, because it was very much, call it fictional nonfiction, it's also sort of literary science fiction, which is not what the group really likes. The only person who liked it compared it to this book, which is another work of fictional nonfiction. And so I'm like, I should probably read this. And I'm aware of there's a whole other category genre called by a number of names, sort of subset of YouTube, mostly from the men in the genre responding and defending the literary merit of these books. Red Flag books, Dick Lit, and the Male Manipulator canon. And the descriptions I've heard of these other books just sound kind of miserable, and I don't like them. And this one might honestly be the same way I've talked about. I don't like grimdark books. I don't like books that are gritty and dark and negative. I just don't like books like that. This one, I still have an incentive, and I try to push myself outside my comfort zone a lot, but I also have to prioritize in what direction am I pushing myself. And I am moving away from the direction of forcing myself to read dark books because I'm realizing that is just a sort of voyeuristic impulse among a lot of people that I don't share. However, given the comparison to the book I want to write, I still want to at least attempt this one at some point, and if I like it, I might try some of these others. But based on the descriptions, I don't think I like them. And so the question that I've asked myself here is, if this was a book that I had read, even if I didn't like it, and if this book wasn't associated with a niche that has a negative reputation, especially based on gender, would I have pulled it? Or did it require one or both of these things to be true? Or was it really, as I said, it was the only book on my shelf that I think is recognizable as belonging to a specific subset of YouTube? And after I had done that, I discovered Randy Ray, the Literate Texan, who's a channel mostly on science fiction horror books, who has this, not even the spine, the book itself facing forward. And so he's clearly not worried about that, but he's also clearly in the fantasy, science fiction, and horror space. And so I actually had a conversation with Copilot, because I often like to play guessing games, especially as I was learning how to use it, to see, can it guess? And I said, hey, I made 2 changes to my shelf when I was filming booktube videos. One of them is the knickknacks, the tchotchkes, and the other one is I pulled one book because it has a sort of reputation of being in a specific niche that also is a niche sort of male-focused and seen negatively. Can you guess what it is? And it had 3 guesses, and Infinite Jest, the correct guess, was the 3rd guess. But the interesting thing is the other 2 books that it guessed are also books that I own, but I have not read. And I think one of them I would have pulled if it had been visible behind me. The other one I would not have. And so the one that I would have pulled is Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. And this one I actually read like 3 chapters. They're short chapters. And I've been wondering actually with this one, and I've acknowledged, like in at least one other video, like I tried to read this book and I have multiple Robert Greene books despite the negative stereotypes. I try to force myself, as I said, outside my comfort zone and to read books I'm not comfortable with. But this one, I just couldn't stand the transactional nature. But I'm realizing, I wonder if I read it like the Screwtape letters as a defensive thing, sort of given tongue-in-cheek, which I don't think is what Robert Greene was doing. But could I read it? So I might at some point, but it's not high on my list. And so this one, obviously, this one I wasn't even worried about specifically the negative view of Robert Greene so much as I don't want to be seen as like a self-help channel, which again is sort of a male stereotype. And I am trying to make like self-help videos, but I'm trying to do it differently. And then the other one, which I would not have pulled and is actually normally sits behind me, but I'm covering it, is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And this one, enough people read it who are not, like obviously there is a like Stoic community on YouTube, but enough people who are not Stoics read it because it is a classic. And it's in a bunch of other Greek and Roman classics I have that I would not have pulled it. Even if people recognized it, I wouldn't have worried about it sending the wrong message. And so I've just been thinking about that because watching a lot of booktube videos on how books are used as status symbols. And for the most part, I don't think of myself as trying to do that anyways. Like, again, I just used the shelf that had the best lighting and I'm like, oh, good mix of stuff. And mostly not too recognizable as being in any specific niche. Some of the stuff how much of the stuff behind me have I read? I'd say about probably a little over half of the stuff on the shelf behind me I've read, and the rest of it is stuff that I want to read at some point. But I just been thinking about this, and I've wanted to make this for a while, but I've wanted to do it with a red shirt, which you might notice the bird is not with me today. And I'm like, well, I can actually change shirts for this and one other video that would have red shirt and then change back. Actually, I have 2 other I wanted red shirt, but anyways, so yeah, I've been thinking about this for a while because I don't really have any specific conclusions. I do think that when people are like, you shouldn't read this book and moralize about it, that is an argument for reading this book, especially like midwit, like elites trying to control your behavior, and I'll have more videos on that. But I'm still, like, especially when it comes to fiction, and especially like really dark fiction, I still don't really have a desire to, I don't even really have a desire to read Infinite Jest, but I am curious enough about how well does it relate to what I want to try to do, at least want to give it a chance. But it is certainly, if I was on the fence, the discourse over don't read these because they're male manipulator red flag books, I would probably, that would push me over to actually reading it, as there are a couple of books that I'll talk about that actually has happened. And I think you need to do that because otherwise you create this, the loudest negative people create this consensus of cutting books that could be useful out of the discussion based on snobbery and social signaling. And I have a video that I recorded that I don't know if it'll be out before or after this one on that topic that's going to be Ugh is not an argument. And so anyways, wanted to talk about this, not really any specific conclusions, but I've just been thinking about it and I've wanted to talk about it for a while. So anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Magpie. See y'all in the next one.